My name is Dan with Goldak Company, Underground Detection out of Glendale, California. And we're here today to discuss the Model 5600 SI pipe and cable locator. This is an instrument that SMUD has been purchasing from us, and a few of the locators would like us to do a demonstration today on the operations of the equipment. First thing we would like to do is in a classroom format. We're going to go through the equipment, the operation of it, and then we'll go into actual field demonstrations outside. Basically, it's as most of the locators that you're using today are what they call active locators, and it's active in the fact that you have both a transmitter and a receiver, where you have to actively put the signal onto the line and then pick that signal back up again. As far as your transmitter goes, it runs on AA batteries. You have 8 in the bottom here. You have an on-off switch with a green light that will fade to both red and green when it's marginal, and will go completely red when it's time to change out those batteries. Now, what's very important with this instrument is when you're done, you need to put it in the off position, otherwise you'll wear the batteries dead. So, as far as putting signal into the line, you only have to remember 2 things. You have 2 modes of operation: direct hookup, conductive locating, or indirect or inducing the signal into a line or cable that you're tracking. As far as direct hookup goes, you'll take out the direct connection cables and plug them directly into the direct output jack. As soon as you do that, you turn the transmitter on, and you have 4 power strengths for this locator. You can hook up direct to the cable, and you can add a ground to an isolated ground with the black lead, shoving it into the earth. When you put that into the earth, all you're going to do is boost your signal. It's a high-low switch. You do not have to use the ground. If you use a ground, just know that you're going to increase your signal strength. So if you're going to want to trace in close to the transmitter, go ahead and take that ground lead off and leave it off. You can manipulate that signal, though, both ways. If you go direct hookup to a pipe or cable, metallic pipe or cable, you can leave the ground lead off. You can put it on high power, which is depressed, or low power, which is in the up position. You can go direct hookup with a ground, and you can go high and low as well. The least amount of signal you could put in would be direct hookup without a ground on low power. The most amount of signal would be direct hookup, adding the ground lead, and depressing the high button to high power, the other 2 positions being in between those. If you can, direct hookup is preferable as far as isolating your cable. If you cannot go direct hookup to a line, you can use also what's called induction. Induction, simply take the clips out of the box, and your transmitter has gone into the induction mode. It will shoot a signal out of the bottom of the box. You can set it next to a riser or over a utility. It will shoot a signal down and couple with the line. In this mode, it's preferred to use it on the high position, which would be depressed, because you want to get the most amount of signal you can inductively. Now, the 5600 SI has a patented feature, which you may or may not know. And what you can do is activate the SI part of the locator. Stands for superinduction. And what you do is turn the transmitter on and put it back into the carrying case like you're going to store it. Now you close up the carrying case, and some electronics built into the carrying case will re-radiate your signal field about 2 to 5 times the signal power, which would translate into 2 to 5 times the tracing distance on that utility. So you have the transmitter turned on in the carrying case, you set it down in line with the utility, and then you slightly offset it. And now you will just create a bigger field, or you can just set it right over a pull box or a meter or a pipe or a cable that you've been tracking, and you will track a lot further than you would just using the blue box by itself. So as far as putting signal into a line, you have direct hookup with or without the ground lead being a signal boost onto that line. And you have induction. You can use the blue box by itself, the transmitter, or you can incorporate the carrying case antenna as part of your transmitting signal and boost that. As far as picking up the signal, as most locators do, the Model 5600 works on both the peak method and the null method. A peak signal occurs when you have the antenna position flat. With the antenna position flat, you will get a fade out to the right, a fade out to the left, and it will beep over the line. It will give you a signal. The signal adjust, which turns it on, will determine how wide or tight that signal field is. Always start out with the locator on low power. When you cannot turn the signal adjust up any further, when the signal maxes out, then it would be time to go to high power. It will increase your tracing distance, but always start out on low. The other way to pick up a signal with this locator is with the antenna vertical. Vertical on either side, it does not matter. It puts it in a null mode, N-U-L-L, null, which means dead spot. It's the exact opposite as a peak. As soon as you rotate the antenna vertically, you will get a full signal to the right side of the pipe, a full signal to the left side of the pipe, and you'll get a cutout right over it, or what's called a null. Now the null point will occur in wider type positions, again, depending on your signal adjust control. So that is the only thing you need to get used to on this locator, is signal adjust, and we will go through this outside and show you how that works on a utility. As far as depth goes, you have to use what's called triangulation, and this will be better illustrated outdoors. But you put the antenna is notched at 45 degrees, you will pull it away from the pipe perpendicular to it, we will get another null point, and we measure that surface distance, let's say 18 inches. The only way we can verify that utility to be 18 inches, you must get 18 inches to the opposite side. So if you get equal reading and equal reading, say 18 and 18, it will be 18 inches deep. If you get 18 inches to one side and say 8 inches to the other, you cannot get a depth. It typically would be caused by another utility running in common trench with you. As far as the receiver gun has a telescoping antenna, you would always want to telescope it out while you're using it, although it would work in the up position. You have a signal adjust, which as soon as you turn that on, you have a green light, which again monitors 8 AA's in the bottom. That again is a dual LED, which will go half red, half green when they're marginal, completely red when the batteries are dead. You have an output jack for headphones, which are the cushy stereo 8-ohm headphones, or even the Walkman, although you notice the audio output on this is extremely strong, so you should not need to use the headphones. Now most of your locators on the newer style will have the little toggle switch, and all that is a battery saver. If you notice on the bar graph, it will work on a full bar graph, and this is again better illustrated outdoors. But if you do flip your toggle switch, it will work on a single light versus the full bar graph, single light. The reason that's in there is in colder temperatures, your AA's will lose output, and we put the single bar graph toggle switch in there. It requires less battery strength to run the meter, and we can temperature rate them lower below 0 degrees Celsius. So in California, most of the time, if you use it on the single bar graph, your batteries will last about 30% longer because it will be running on less battery power. So it's more of a preference than anything else. Now one of the attachments that you've received with your Model 5600 is another mode of putting signal into a line, which is the inductive clamp. The inductive clamp is just what it says, induction. Although you do go into the direct output, turn the instrument on, you encircle cables typically that are energized with power. Since you cannot go direct hookup, you can try to isolate cables amongst other cables by encircling them. You do have to remember though that it is induction, and the same rule applies with normal induction by using the transmitter by itself, and that is you need signal path in 2 directions, metallic signal path in 2 directions to get good signal into that line, which is not true with direct hookup. So for induction mode, whether you're using the super antenna, the blue transmitter setting over a utility, or an inductive clamp, will really only work well when you have signal path in 2 directions to ground. So depending on how your system's grounded determines how these work inductively. On a direct hookup with the direct connection cables, that prerequisite is not true. It wouldn't matter how the system's grounded, or if you were at the end of a run and you didn't have the signal path in 2 directions. So for induction to work properly, you need to have that condition to exist. You will get a little bit of signal sometimes, but you'll notice that you will not trace as far depending on how the grounds are on the cable that you're tracking. Okay, an easy way to put signal into a pad mount like this without having to open it up is you can go direct hookup right to the housing. By doing this, we don't have to open this up. Open up the door to use our inductive clamp, and you can feed right through the signal through a ground strap since this is grounded and locate the cables that are coming out. One important thing to note though is on a direct hookup you must scratch through the paint in order to get a good bite into it. So now that we've made direct contact, I will go back, and typically on your locate you'll be depressing the on button, of course, and also depressing the high button. Then we can go out and try to pick up that signal. Now, if we cannot pick the signal up or we don't get the tracing distance that we need, we can go ahead and ground the instrument, thus boosting our signal. Again, hooking to an isolated ground is just going to create more signal strength. Again, if I'm going to work in close between, say, 60 or 50 feet, you probably don't need the ground. It's going to be too much signal, and it makes the sensitivity control on your receiver gun very sensitive. So you may want to first try it without a ground, and if you can trace it that way, that's just fine. If you need to go further in distance, you can go ahead and ground it out, thus boosting your signal. Now, a lot of people ask if the high-low switch has to match the high-low switch on the receiver. That's not true. The high-low switch on the receiver gun is only used when you cannot pick up the signal anymore, when you have your signal just turned up to a maximum. Then it would be time to go to high power. The high-low switch on your transmitter just determines how much signal is going to come out. So if you're going to work in close, you can try low power. You can try it without a ground. If you're going to track further, go ahead and ground it out, or go ahead and turn it up to high power. Okay, we have now energized the cable with signal, and we're about to pick that signal back up again. Depending on which method you are going to use to locate is determined by the antenna position. If I rotate the antenna into a vertical position, you will be working in the null method or looking for a dead spot. The easiest way to do that is put the antenna vertical, turn up your signal adjust until you get a full signal, until our lights hit totally to the edge. You do not want to saturate, though, by turning your gain up too high. You would like to just bring it up to a full mode, and then searching for the line, we'll walk across. Looking for a void in the signal. The definition of a null is full signal, cutout, full signal. To track this line, we will just listen for the cutout. Just listening for the void in the tone. If you have the signal adjust too low, you may get full signal to the right, we get a void, and we get signal to the left. But notice how wide the null is over this Piper cable. To narrow this in, you must increase the gain. As we turn this up, our dead spot or null will decrease. And that's what we're looking for. Full, dead, full, dead. Okay, to switch the locator from a null mode to a peak mode, we rotate the antenna flat. Now right now, we have a direct hookup with the ground. We have quite a bit of signal on this line. If you go into a peak mode, you can determine whether or not you have a lot of signal by how the peak reacts. In this situation here, we're getting a real wide peak. We're not getting a sharp rise and drop off that we're looking for. What that is telling me is we have a tremendous amount of signal right here, so we need to go back and cut down that signal. So we could go back and try it with the ground lead off, or we could hit our high-low button and decrease our signal strength. What we've done is taken the ground lead off, decreasing our signal strength, and you'll notice our peak will be much sharper. We'll get a sharp rise and a sharp drop off as we pass over the cable. Drop off, drop off, drop off. Right at the high point of the lights will give us a maximum of signal, which should be the same spot as our null. If peak and null are in the same position, it is an excellent indication that we're locating the line that we are hooked up to. Going back to a peak mode, you can also get direction by rotating the gun on its axis. If I rotate it left, the signal will drop off. Rotating it to the right, again, looking for a maximum by tone and by the lights. We'll line up with the pistol grip, or we'll put the antenna at a perpendicular to the utility we're locating. In other words, if I'm looking for a utility that's running east and west, I would not walk with the locator in this position. I will never find it. If you're working on a peak mode, you need the locator to cross it so that the cable would be lining up with the pistol grip, or that you're coming into the utility with the antenna position flat and coming in perpendicular. In other words, crossing through the utility. As far as depth goes, you cannot peak a depth. So in order to get depth, you have to find a null. So I'll put the antenna into a vertical position. We mark the line right here. Now to get depth, what you'd like to do is it's notched at 45 degrees at the end of the knuckle here. I'll bring it up to a full tone. And again, we'll pull it away perpendicular to the utility. And we're looking for a null point. And again, the definition of a null is full, 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 and cut out. Do not make a mistake of turning up your gain and saying that's where my depth is, because if you continue on, notice that you just have a wide dead spot. Again, you would need to increase your gain. We'll tighten up the null, the dead spot. So we say surface measurement from the locate of the utility to 45 degrees is our depth down. Okay, maybe. The only way you can verify is flip it 45 degrees to the other side. So you get another cutout. We'll say right about here. If that measurement equals this measurement, you have the depth of your utility. If this measurement is not equal to this measurement, you cannot get a depth. It could be one side, it could be the other measurement, it could be neither. What it does tell you, though, is that your signal field is being manipulated. You don't have a nice circular signal pattern anymore. The signal is being skewed. It's normally caused by another utility. So if we go down this run, and let's say I get a long side and a short side on my depth readings, and that continues along this run, you could almost be assured that you have another utility down there. So it does give you useful information about your utility, although you cannot get depth. And remember, USA, the Underground Service Alert, does not require you by law to give depth to a contractor, so you never have to give depth to a contractor. It would just be for the own internal use of your SMUD district or agency. So just make sure you get equal readings to both sides, but make sure that you always rotate the antenna so it's pointing back towards the utility as you take your depth readings. If I come off to this side, I could just rotate the gun around and come off this way, but you'd always want the antenna pointing back towards the utility that you're locating. Again, working on a peak mode with the antenna flat works exactly the opposite of a null. Just to review, if you have a wide dead spot with the antenna vertical, to narrow that signal in, you will be increasing the gain control, the signal adjust. It nulls out. It's exactly the opposite for a peak. A peak signal is just going to will just give us a high point over the utility. If you have a real wide signal, to narrow that in, you must turn down the signal adjust. As a general rule, you like to work half scale. You would like to work half scale on the meter so you can narrow it down to a point where if it goes full scale, back it down, full scale, back it down, drop off, drop off. That's what you're looking for. Okay, let's say for example we have tracked out a utility, and let's just say we've gone a certain distance, typically anywhere from 100 feet to a mile depending on what you're locating. But let's just say we track this line out and the signal faded out right here. You would not have to dig up that utility and go direct hookup to it. Since they work inductively, what you'd like to do is go ahead and mark out the line before the signal faded out, go back and grab your transmitter, take the clips out, and now we're going into the induction mode, the second method of putting signal into a utility. We will set it down over the line, and always when you're using the induction mode, you want to set it in line with the direction that you think the utility is running and offset it to either side. You never want to trace inductively and look back and see that you're coming directly off the end of the transmitter. If you're doing that, you may just be picking up the transmitter itself. So you go ahead and offset the line so that the transmitter will be pointing off this way, and you should continue on your straight trace coming out. This airlock, though, between transmitter and receiver of picking up that side signal can occur sometimes up to about 50 feet away. After that, it would not matter if it's pointing right at you. So we've set the transmitter down in the direction of the utility. We have a slight offset. Then we'll always start out inductively about maybe 10, 15 feet away to try to pick up the signal again. So we're transmitting a signal into the line inductively, and we're picking back up again with the receiver, just like a direct hookup as far as picking up the signal, but we're inducing the field instead. You'll notice that the transmitter is turned on high power, which is the way you're going to want to use it inductively. And you'll notice the offset of the transmitter, and we're continuing on our straight trace coming out. A null signal, as well as with the antenna flat, we'll get a peak signal. As far as using the super antenna on the induction mode, will work the same as we just demonstrated with the transmitter. Just by itself, we can incorporate the carrying case as part of the transmitting antenna. Typically, on of course, on high power, which is depressed. And if you'd like to save your battery, you can also pulse the signal as well. It will locate the same way, but now we will have a pulsing signal. Put it in the carrying case like you're going to store it. And one thing, when you're done using the carrying case antenna, it's very, very easy to leave the transmitter on, since it's part of the carrying case antenna. So you always want to make sure that the on position is in an up or off position when you're done locating. Right now we'll turn it on, and I've got all three depressed, high power, pulsing, and the instrument turned on. There's no physical connections needed. The electronics in the carrying case will take that signal and re-radiate it more efficiently, adding to signal strength as far as tracing distance, or if you ever had to induce down to a deep utility. Again, we'll set it in line with the utility, and then we'll offset it. Except now, when we go to pick up the signal, since we're using the carrying case antenna, we will start out, before we start locating, maybe 20, 25 feet away minimum, just because of the increased output of the carrying case antenna. If we walked off here, we would pick up the utility the same way, except we would be a lot lower on our signal adjust, because we would be receiving a lot more signal. But as far as putting the signal into the line, again, offset either direction is fine. About 15 degrees or so is excellent. It will locate the same way. Okay, right now we're just demonstrating a inductive locate, picking up the signal again inductively, or in other words, inducing the field, but just showing you the pulse mode by depressing the pulse button on our transmitter. Again, antenna vertical, we get the cutout over the line, we get a pulsing signal to the right, pulsing signal to the left, versus the continuous tone. Locates the same way, except it's a signal identifier, plus it will save the batteries a little bit longer on our transmitter by pulsing the signal. Same thing holds true for our peak mode. We will put the antenna flat, we get fade out, and just a pulsing tone over the utility. You'll notice in the demonstration so far, a nice left to right motion just like this is just fine. Right through the utility, left, right. You do not have to be very rigid with this locator. It will always point back to the utility, even if we're off to the side a little bit. Utility's over here. Just to give you a visual display of the inductive clamp, it plugs into the direct output, as does our direct connection cables. Turn on the instrument in high power. Now, we don't have a demonstration here, but normally you just take a cable and circle it, thus energizing the utility with a concentrated inductive field inside the clamp. Works the same way as far as locating, you're just putting the signal in a different method. So we encircle a cable, and we'll induce the line inductively through the inductive clamp.